to be aware, you can't really, that's like, how do you teach a team sales if you're leading people for sales and you don't know really how to sell? So if you want to lead your team emotionally correctly, you have to be emotionally connected to your own feelings.
Welcome to the podcast about business communication. I'm your host, George Torok. I'm known as the speech coach for executives because I help business leaders deliver the intended message for greater success. My guest today is Kim Korte. Here's 3 facts that I think you should know about Kim. 1, she is the author of, I bet you've never heard a title like this, Yucky Yummy Savory Sweet, Understanding the Flavors of Emotions. 2, ideation, that's the creation of ideas, is number 1 on her Clifton Strengths Assessment, which explains her high level of curiosity. And 3, she pivoted from 20 years in consulting to a perception and emotion management strategist with the plan of speaking on stages worldwide. Kim Korte, welcome to Your Intended Message.
Well, thank you, and I am happy to be here.
Delighted to be talking with you. And in your book, you compare emotions to food and food sensations and flavors. How did you come up with that connection, and why does that resonate with you?
I came up with it. First, I have to say that I learned about the theory of constructed emotions, which is a very common and probably fairly widely accepted idea that we construct our emotions using our experiences, kind of like ingredients and a recipe. And I got this idea after reading How Emotions Are Made: The Secret Life of the Brain by Lisa Feldman Barrett. It was an eye-popping book, and it got me to think about how if emotions are created from perceptions, then our whole world is like giving us ingredients that we use, and the recipes are everything that we've experienced previously. So we're always living today in the past unless we're more conscious of what's going on in our current experience. That level of consciousness is what helps us to examine and change the quote unquote recipe if it's not the right one or if it's not working for us. And the process of flavor, it's not a sensory system. Like everything that we taste, everything we see, all of these things, these are sensory systems. And taste is a combination of sensory systems. You taste with your nose, you taste with your mouth. They even have shown that what you see and what you hear, like if it's crunchy, you think it's fresh, but even music going on around you, you might think, oh, this music isn't impacting me, but it really can impact the flavor and your experience of food. And the same is true of our emotions. Everything that we experience our emotions rather, are a combination of our sensory experiences. That's what influences us. So this is where I got these food metaphors and cooking metaphors. We've got, I'll just to repeat it again, these sensory inputs that are coming from the outside world and our inside world are what our brain uses to predict. This is a prediction, just like every other sensory experience. We predict it with our brains, and then we experience it in our body as an emotion. It's literally a signal. And then when we can connect to the feeling that is produced by this emotion, the more we can connect to it, the better we are at tasting that. Just like a chef can taste a dish and go, like these flavors are good or bad, or I need more of this, or I need less of that. When we can connect to those signals in our body, that's like us tasting our emotions to know, like, is this right for the moment? Like, is this appropriate? Or is this really what I'm feeling? Like, I might have thought it was this, but maybe it's not. So that's kind of the idea behind it.
Kim, are we a slave to our emotions?
No, we're not. In fact, I want people to feel much more empowered after reading my book or listening to my podcast or even hearing this podcast, in that we have an opportunity in every single feeling to change it. It's just being able to connect to it. We think that people make us feel a certain way. I know I did. And I still sometimes catch myself in that trap. But it's not other people, it's us. It's how we respond to the sensory ingredients that we're given. So because it's a response from within us, nobody's jumping into our bodies and producing that emotional response. It's us. So because it is us, we can change it. And I'm living proof of that, because everything that I have in my book, I really created for myself. And it's been a part of my emotional journey to make these changes and to recognize my own feelings and to become actually just much more friendly with them. I see them more for what they are. I'm not as afraid of them as I was previously. And that's, I think, where people get into that I'm a slave because they're afraid of them, and they become their slaves. Not that they have to. It's just that they become a slave to it because they're run by fear of them.
You mentioned fear, which is often considered, I don't know if it's the strongest emotion, but it certainly can be a destructive emotion. I don't know if that's fair to say, but do we have more control of our fears than we think we do?
You know, George, it goes back to the whole thing about, am I a slave to my emotions or am I the master? And when I mean master, I don't mean like I never feel like anyone can truly master their emotions, but am I the owner of them? Am I the one who makes the decision for how I feel? And we have the choice to, let me do it this way. So if you are in a situation where you are with someone, they're with a dog, or they have a dog, and you've been afraid of dogs your whole life, you've been afraid of dogs. And if you look at that dog and see them differently, this is a safe dog. This dog is my friend's dog. It's very gentle and it's happy. And I don't have to fear this dog. I don't see it growling. You know, all the things that maybe had happened in your past when you were afraid of dogs, you don't see in this dog because you're conscientiously adding detail about this dog that could apply to other dogs too, to make that emotional response different. So whereas maybe you got bit or a dog chased you when you were a kid, this dog's not chasing you. It's about being conscious and present about this moment where you're feeling fear and questioning it. Yeah, I had that bad experience, but in this experience, it's not. And you could use this for anything, with bosses, with authority, with all kinds of situations. It's called emotional granularity, and it's allowing more detail about your emotional experiences and looking at it in the present in a more conscious manner. Does that make sense, George?
I'm trying to process that, Kim. And yes, I see the logic. And what I'm hearing, and tell me if I have this right, please, is what I'm hearing is if we become more aware of our emotions and then analyze what's causing that, maybe we can change the inputs. Is that a fair way of saying it?
Yes. So think of it like a pepper. And let's just say, we all know, right? There's different kinds of peppers. There's bell peppers and there's jalapenos and there's habaneros and there's other, like, I don't know how many different kinds of peppers. And yet we don't attribute hot spiciness to every single pepper out there, right? because we've learned to distinguish the differences situationally and experientially of different peppers. And so the same can be true with our fears, because we tend to have this like one size fits all approach to a lot of emotions. And we feel one emotion more than others. And we haven't allowed ourselves to recognize that fear can be like a pepper. Even love can be like a pepper and have different gradations of it, different levels of quote unquote heat. And with that, you are able to break down that fear into seeing it in its different states. It could be irked, could be nervous, it could be irate, it could be, I need to run for the door, panic. Same with love. Love could be a crush. It could be Twitter pated, like literally just passion, like your groins are feeling it, not necessarily your heart, but it's kind of like this whole body thing. And so you're thinking, oh, I'm in love. But if you can learn to distinguish those feelings, just like a pepper, then that's going to give you and your brain more information to use. So if you think about what is a memory, and I don't know if you've really even ever thought about what a memory is, but it's a combination of sensory experiences. When you reflect on a memory, it's who was with you. So what you see, what you smell, what you were hearing, potentially what you tasted. It's all these sensory inputs. But what people don't realize is that our ability to feel inside of our bodies and what we feel, our feelings, are a sensory experience. And that sensory system is called interoception. And so in our memories, we store that interoceptive experience, how we felt and how we labeled it at the time. So if, let's say, I have an experience with you like I'm creating right now, I would just say, George interviewed me in my memory, and it was in my office, and I had my doggies nearby, and it was pretty quiet outside, and I'm maybe a little thirsty. And, all of this might get put into my memory, but also how I'm feeling at this very point in time, which is really happy and excited to get to share this conversation. And I'm going to use this again so that if I ever had a podcast with you, that would be what my brain is going to predict my experiences with you is going to be based on that. And how I feel about it is going to be used by my brain based on this experience. And so our memories, everything that we have in our brains, are used for future prediction. And that's even what we see. That's what we hear. Like, I see a red rose. I learned a long time ago what a red rose. I don't have to think about it. I know what a red rose is because I learned it. So really all we're talking about is adding to our learning, adding more detail to our learning. And so if I had another experience with you, that's what my brain would expect unless something else differently happened. And then that could change my recipe, right? For my experiences with you. So then now what I do is relabel you with a different label in my head, my feelings. I've got a new experience with you with a new feeling that I've labeled. Maybe I was disgruntled with you. Like, I could imagine that. And so that kind of gets you to that idea of like, now I have a new recipe for time with George, a little disgruntled. And so depending on the next time we're together, I might have a different experience, or I might call back that gruntled experience because that's what I'm expecting.
If we have a good experience and the memories are a good experience, and so our memories will predict that this event or person will be similar to the previous good experience, I can see that. And let's build on what you were saying. So what happens if the first experience, the memory, was a negative experience, and then you're going to do that same activity again? What can you do to change the prediction?
very good question. And I'm going to give you a real life example. And it's probably apropos. This was many, many, many years ago. So has nothing to do with the current political situation or either of the presidential candidates here in the United States. I just want to preface that right now. But there was a presidential candidate, and I was entirely negative about one of their positions. I felt very strongly about it. And because I felt so strongly about that position, I had a high degree of negative reaction to this candidate. I did not even want to listen to this candidate speak. Over time, and partly, I guess, just, what I've been learning, I decided, okay, probably a lot with having to do with what I've been learning. But I said, okay, I'm going to listen to what this person has to say. And I'm going to listen to other things that they have to say. And I was able to change my feelings about that person because I took in more information. I learned more about them. Now, when we have negative experiences, we tend to want to stay away, right? Because we said, oh, that person's awful because of this. And so we want nothing to do with them. But that is really, really dangerous. And I'm going to tell you why, is because your experience with that person could have been your mood at the time, how you believed about something at the time, other things that were going on in your life that might have influenced it. What you perceived might not have been the full story. We hear a little bit, like our brain filters and focuses. And especially if we're leery or fearful or distrustful, right? We're going to focus on the things that we're fearful or leery or distrustful of. And so by changing my perceptions, by adding in more information about this candidate, I was able to look at them much less dispassionately and actually have a level of respect. Although that one topic I still pretty much feel the same about, not as passionately, but I feel the same. I still have a level of respect for this former candidate and actually like them now. So it's a information game, and it's an understanding of we are here to learn. We were born to learn. And hate and fear and distrust and all of those things, they don't serve us. And yet we are eating it up in the world left and right, because that is physically, literally what we're being served in social media and news and all this other stuff. But if we take ownership of our feelings and say, okay, let me learn more about this. Like, what's the other side of this? Especially where we're super passionate, it's when we become more granular in our feelings. And it's where we can either confirm what we like or don't like, or expand upon what we like or don't like, refine our beliefs, and become more detailed in who we are as a human being. Does that answer your question, George?
I follow you, yes. And I want to pick up on something you said there.
Okay.
Are you suggesting that information and logic can help us direct our emotions?
I'm going to say information for sure.
Okay.
Absolutely. Logic is a funny thing, because we want to say, oh, we're dispassionate about it. But our emotions drive everything that we think, feel, believe, like more often than not. But conscious thought, conscious action is where we are able to refine and redefine what it is we believe. And so unless we take that action to be more consciously aware of our feeling, and if it's truly appropriate, if we don't believe every single thing that we feel, then we have that opportunity. And you might think this takes a lot of time, but it really doesn't. And if it's something that you feel very strongly about, I think it's very, very important to hear other sides, because it allows you to be more well-rounded as a human, but also just emotionally. to be more aware of other people and also to have more compassion and sympathy and empathy for how other people think and believe too. Because really, we all are a product of our past, and why they believe something, there's a reason for it. And understanding what that reason is benefits everybody.
Now, I'm thinking of the phrase that most of us have heard probably many times. You're just being emotional. Well, the reality is we always are emotional, I believe.
Yes. Yeah,
So that statement is like saying you're alive.
Well, exactly. So people don't realize, there's a very silly part in my book, is that emotions come, I say, in two flavors. There's the kind that we're more familiar with, like love, hate, blah, blah, blah. But actually, thirst is an emotion. Hunger is an emotion. Tired is an emotion. These are emotions that the body produces that we have to connect to keep us alive. They're called homeostatic emotions. So if you know that word homeostasis, it's where the body's trying to keep us within a range in order to keep us healthy and alive. So your temperature, if it gets too low, you are going to be prompted to want to go underneath a blanket. You don't notice the temperature till it's too cold. And then if it gets too hot, you're going to want to take your sweater off. And this is our body communicating to us. The same as it does with love and hate and all of that. We tamp down that interoceptive system, that sensory system that tells us how we feel inside of our bodies. Then we start to tamp down those feelings too. We might not notice hunger. We might not notice illnesses. This is why people with high levels of interoceptive awareness are healthier and go to the doctor less often. One of those things is that the difference in your feelings. Like you can say, oh, I'm not really mad here. I'm hungry. I need food. My blood sugar's low and that's why I'm responding. Hangry, right? But so is hunger an emotion? When we're ravenous, is that being emotional? I'd say yes.
And I'm thinking about anger, where people will excuse something that they do in anger as, well, I can't help it. I was angry. You made me angry. And what's your approach to that?
That sounds really good, right? To say someone else made you angry. And I'm going to go back to thinking that you have this little chef in your head, this tiny little chef and your brain is this kitchen filled with chefs. And in comes these ingredients and of what this person was saying. And it's what the brain filtered of those ingredients. So there's 11 million bits of information coming at us every second, and we can get 40 to 50. So the brain does some filtering, just so you know, and our focus will help the brain filter what you get. So you're taking in this much information, a limited amount of information. And then the brain says, ooh, here's these ingredients. It's kind of like that show Chopped. Have you ever seen that on Food Network, where they get a surprise basket of food and they've got to make something with it and they're going to use their prior experience. So the brain is doing the same thing. It's getting these ingredients and saying, okay, this is how we've cooked before. Let's make a best guess and, chef fear. Let's produce some of this. And it gets produced and that recipe gets delivered to the body. And you literally have cells in your body that would eat that dish and then you feel it. And so who's responsible for that response in that situation? And that's like saying you made me see this, or you made me smell this, or you made me hear this. Nobody makes you hear. Nobody makes you see. Nobody makes you smell. You do. And the same with your emotions.
Kim, is there some kind of daily exercise that we can do to keep in contact with our emotions and to be more recognizable what's happening to our body, our system, our brain? What can we do?
I think the most important thing is to connect to having feelings. I have a whole chapter that is devoted just to what I call emotion chefs and the different various levels of emotion chefs, because some of us, and I'm going to raise my hand included, tamp down that sensory system. So I wasn't very connected to all the smaller emotions. It wasn't until they got really big. It's kind of like not paying attention to your hunger pains, and then all of a sudden you're ravenous. That's how I was emotionally. So then when it came out really big. And I couldn't distinguish those little nuanced ones. So people like that, like myself, I use just paying attention to physical signals, even just using food. Take a bite of food. Notice all the different components. Like, do you taste the salt? What do you taste in your food? What does it feel like as it goes into your body? How does your body change when you've got food in it? What is that feeling like? How would you label it? And that might sound like really, really silly, but you're just connecting to the signals that your body is giving you. It's talking to you all the time. It's just, are you listening? And when we can connect to those and get more and more connected, then we start to pay attention to, okay, in this situation, when you've got a really big feeling coming up, right? Like you just feel it all in your body. Notice it and then say, okay, what's going on right now that's making me feel this way? Like, what in particular is it? And what does that have to do with the situation at hand? Because we're always living in the past. Our past is always in the present, and it might have nothing to do with the current situation. It's just very similar to something else that had happened in your past. And so now that gives you that moment to become more conscious and aware of what's going on and perhaps change how you feel or clarify the situation, which I think is even better. And this is a super strong communication tool as an executive, as a leader, even just in your day-to-day interactions with others, is that knowledge, that humility that we sometimes need to know that what I am perceiving might not be correct. And those perceptions are influencing how I feel. So how can I take in more ingredients? And I like to say it's like giving your brain a cookbook instead of having, like I have somewhere in my bookshelf here, 2 cookbooks. One is Italian recipes with 100, and the other one is with 1,000. And we want our life to be like a recipe book with thousands, because that means that your brain has more to choose from. And then you give your brain that information in that moment, and then it will have it for the future. And the more we practice this, just being more aware when we have the big feelings coming up. And even if they're really, it could be true of positive feelings too. I like love, like fear and love are the big ones, right? And even positive emotions can have negative outcomes. That's why I like to say emotions aren't positive or negative. The outcomes are, because fear is really good if you don't want to fall off a cliff, right? It's good to listen, but you just want to fine tune what it's saying. And that's up to you. And the same with love. You can fall in love with the wrong person. You can fall in love too easily and go in too deep too fast. And guess what? That can have negative outcomes. So that's what I recommend. Paying attention to the feeling and being more consciously aware of the perceptive ingredients that you've taken in and that you may have missed, and maybe try and find out, like, what did I miss in here?
Kim, I'm thinking of the situation where, let's say in the workplace, where there is something at work, in the workplace, whether it's a person or persons or just the conditions that we need to deal with every day. And our approach is to try to ignore it, but yet it gnaws at us inside. And then one day we simply explode in a rage. How can we avoid that explosion?
Well, I would pay attention to the feelings that you ignore, because let's go back to hunger or pain. You ignore things and it gets bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger because your body wants you to take attention to it. It's nagging you, as whether you like it or not. Your brain can be a nag. And so there's a reason it wants you to handle it. So if you can look at that, whatever that situation is, and do exactly what I said before, this is a conscious effort to look at it. Do I really feel this way? What is the benefit of my belief around this emotion? Because that's literally what it is all about, right? What we believe the situation is. And do we really believe that is detrimental to us, or is it really as irritating as we believe it is, or whatever that situation is? Because you didn't give details. I'm just kind of guessing here. Like, we have a coworker who does something a certain way. Maybe we just need to talk to the coworker and find out more information about why they do something a certain way. Like, what's behind your methodology? We can do this quite easily, and it might create a better working relationship. That's what I'm saying. We were born to learn. If you think about how much learning that we do from the time we're born to the time we're 5, and we continue to learn every day, it's only we don't always take an active role in that. We're not always the one who's like trying to direct what we're learning in this moment. We're just letting it happen to us. So if we take active action and say, okay, let me learn about this situation that's bugging me so badly. Now, all of a sudden, just like I did not hate that presidential candidate, or I should say strongly dislike, I didn't hate this person. We can do the same in any situation just by taking in more information. And it can help us either to, feel more strongly. You wouldn't look at this for confirmation bias. Like, you wouldn't want to go to learn, this is an idiot. I want to learn more about this person being an idiot. You want to try and find the other side of it, like the behind, like what's going on in your life, like, or what is your methodology, your reasoning for this approach. Let's say you didn't like how they approached clients or something. That's what I would recommend. But that's kind of like a quick thing without a real situation. But you kind of get where I'm going with, don't you, George?
Yes. Yep. And Kim, for people who'd like to know more about you, they can find information at your website. That's Kim Korte, and that's KORTE.com. And you can find that link in the description below. Kim, as we prepare to wrap up, if you could sit down with a business leader, a team leader who needs to, that they would have a better team, a better grasp of their team if they had a better understanding of emotions and how that influences them and their own team. If you could give them 1, 2, or 3 pieces of advice to have a more cohesive team, what might that be? I
will tell you that in my many years of working, my emotions were probably almost going to result in me losing my job twice. And at that time, I didn't see it, and I had no control over it, right? And I've been dealing even most recently with an organization where emotions are a huge, huge, huge issue. And so it's a matter, I think, of first, you need to be more emotionally aware. To be aware, you can't really, that's like, how do you teach a team sales if you're leading people for sales and you don't know really how to sell? So if you want to lead your team emotionally correctly, you have to be emotionally connected to your own feelings. And then I like to incorporate the compassion without empathy. And that might sound really funny, but if you can have compassion for somebody, you're going to be motivated how to help them. If you have too much empathy, you want some, but if you have too much empathy, and there's a huge empathy push, is that you can actually have that to the detriment of the rest of a team or an organization because you're so focused on your feelings for that person and being too connected to how they feel without looking at the empathy for the entire organization, or the compassion will be more compelling to help them move along. And then using this idea of ingredients. And in fact, I'm going to read, where is it? I'm going to read a quote from a chief accounting officer who read my book. He said, he gave deep thought to the ingredients that he uses when acting and reacting in various circumstances, and wondered about the ingredients others might be using, resulting in their actions, reactions. And I think that this is an important point. It's like, what ingredients are we feeding our company? What ingredients are we feeding our team? Now, just like in shop, they could use them differently because that's up to them. Like, you can't control how somebody feels. The only two things that you can do is give them the detail in the ingredients that is true to you and what you're saying, and enable them to be more astute, to have a better interoceptive awareness by using questions, asking them like, okay, give me detail about like why you feel this way about this project. And by using that detail, it can help to uncover things that are not related to the project, or whatever. I'm just saying project because I'm project oriented, or that they might discover, well, they really don't feel this way. And so I think this ingredient management is super important.
Powerful advice. My guest today is Kim Korte, reminding you that you are not a slave to your emotion. You can become the owner of your emotions. If you like what you heard, tell your friends and post your 5-star review on Apple Podcasts, because that helps more listeners find us. Come back every week for more practical insights to help you deliver your intended message. I'm your host, George Torok.